did you guys want to conduct an interview, or do you want to take questions? The questions.
You had planned.
Okay. Well, what we usually do is that we'll, some questions, comments come up, and then Anita might be able, she will respond. And as she's responding, you know, it'll So we'd like to, is there any questions? Any questions for Anita? Any particular things in the movie that seem to be, you know, intriguing, or there was some kind of question about it, or any kind of you know, inquiry of any kind? Just feel free. Don't all speak all at once now.
I have a question.
Oh, there you go.
So where were you? There was a scene where they were licking stamps and stuffing envelopes and doing mailings. Where were you in that scene?
I was there. I was there. There were, I think, a couple of ladies, and one of them is running the mimeograph, and I'm in the back. And that's one of them. And the mass meeting where the women are all lined up against the wall, I'm there too with my daughter. My daughter at the time was 2 years old, I think.
Thank you.
Say or influence did women have in the making of the movie, since it was directed and I think written by Michael, what's his name, Hendricks or something? How much did women have influence in the production of the movie, since it was such a thematic, such a thread and a theme in the movie of equality for women as well?
The women had a lot to say. A lot. That's why it took so long. Because the women, you know, everybody said what they thought, you know, and you know, the Hollywood people, the blacklisted people were there, and they had their idea of how they were going to do it. And then the women either objected or refused, and they said no. That's there were several instances where they did have to change because of the women, you know. Like for instance, they wanted the leading part of the women. They had thought that they were going to have a white lady take it. And the workers, men and women, didn't agree. They said, no, this is our story. And we should be, if we can, we should take that part. And so there was a lot of discussion, a lot of disagreements at times, and discussions until they came to an agreement.
Very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe you could say a little bit about what the context of Real Strike, and it was, how did it come to be making a movie of that?
Well, you know, that's a long story. It's a long story, but you know, who would have thought? Who would have thought that that's the way it was going? That this strike, that was the way it was going to end? It so happened that after the strike, you know, everybody was burned out. Everybody was tired, and they wanted rest. And the organizer, his real name, Clint Jenks, he was the organizer of Mine Mill. At that time, it was Mine Mill and Smelter Workers. That was the union at that time. And he took a few days off. He took a vacation, and he went to Taos, to a guest ranch, to spend a few days there, he and his wife. And it happened that he met a couple from the Hollywood 10. They met there. And they started talking, and Clint told them the story, told them that they had just gone through a strike and all of that. And this Hollywood person,
Paul Jericho.
and he got into it, you know, he wanted to know more and more. And Clint suggested, well, maybe you, because that's a long ways from Taos all the way to Grant County where we were at. Taos is way up north, you know, up by Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so Clint suggested maybe you should come by so that you can talk to the women and all that. So he did. That's the way it started. He came, he got in touch with the union membership and talked to a lot of the women, and he thought that it was a good idea. So then he went back to California and talked to the other group, because there was a group, you know, of the, was it 10? The blacklist? They were 10 that were blacklisted. And so they got together and talked about it and agreed. So then they came down to Grant County and talked and talked. That was the way it started. They decided that it was a good try, that they would like to take it and make a movie out of it. And of course in Grant County everybody agreed at the time.
Stories or memories that really stick out for you, your own personal experience during the filming, anything that sticks out, any strong memories that you could share with us?
Well, I try to keep those memories, but you know, every year I'm a year older, and I'm not very good at keeping memories. It seems like I'm forgetting. But you know, I've seen the movie a lot of times, and it seems like every time I see the movie, I see something that I missed the time before. But you know, it was a big lesson, because at the time the strike started, I was not very knowledgeable even about the union. You know, I never went. It was much after that I started going to the meetings, you know, because at the time the ladies' auxiliary wasn't that strong either. But there were a few ladies that were strong from the ladies' auxiliary, and they were trying to get everyone involved, and they came to me and wanted to take me to the union meeting. And I said, well, I don't think I can go. I had 2 babies at the time, you know. And my husband was working that night of the meeting. He was working evenings, so he wasn't there. So this lady that takes one of the leading parts in there, she said, we will help you with the babies. Let's go. Let's go to the meeting. So I went. Well, it turned out that meeting, you know, the union meeting was over, and then the union people that were there extended the meeting, but not at the hall. They said, no, we'll go to, which was to Juan Chacon's home, and continue the meeting. So here we go, which was a few more miles away from there. And the meeting went on and on and on. Of course, the kids went to sleep, and finally it was time to go home. So here we come home, which was, we were like 10, 12 miles away. So we get home where I lived in Silver City. The meeting, the union hall is in Bayard, which is a few miles away. So we come home, and it was around midnight, or after midnight. And we come home, and my husband is there, and he's, no lights, he's sitting on a chair, and he's sitting there. He didn't know where I was. We didn't have any phones, you know, I didn't call. How was I going to call? So we come home, and he's sitting there on a chair. And he didn't seem to be too happy about it. He didn't know where I was. So this lady had told me, she says, don't worry about it, I'll talk to him, I'll explain to him. No, well, I wasn't worried. I mean, what could I do then? I mean, everything was already done, so we come in and put the kids to bed, and then she sits down and she talks to my husband and tries to explain to him, you know, what all had happened. Well, my husband was not very talkative to begin with, so he didn't say much. He says, well, okay. And so then we you know, I kept going to the union meetings. But that was my first experience to begin with the union.
Nancy?
Juan Chacon's real wife and all this.
Pregnant.
Okay.
Pregnant, so she didn't participate in the picket line, very little, you know. But by that time, she also had 2 kids, you know, and she was about to have the 3rd one. And in fact, that the baby that's used in the baptismal, that's their baby, Juan and Virginia's baby. And it was a girl, but in the film, it's Juanito. They named him Juanito. But she was only a few weeks old at the time.
They weren't really there during the strike, right?
Who?
Juan and Virginia.
They weren't there during the strike?
That's what I heard, that they moved there afterwards, that they weren't there. They were in the movie, but he was in the movie, but he wasn't in the strike, or is that wrong?
I don't understand.
Juan Chacon.
Yeah.
I think Lorenzo told me that he wasn't actually living there during the strike. He wasn't working. He moved there after, so he's in the movie, but he wasn't in the strike. Is that correct?
Well, he wasn't Juan was not an Empire Zinc worker. The strike was with Empire Zinc. He was a Kinnicott worker.
Right, okay.
He was a Kinnicott worker working in Burley where he lived. The strike was Empire Zinc, which was in Hanover, where my husband worked.
Yeah, so he's not playing himself, he's playing, yeah.
So they tried him out, you know, and he proved successful, and that's why they gave him the part, you know. And then the other ladies too, you know, they weren't professional. I was trying for a part, but
You missed your chance of being
I
a famous
missed my
movie
chance.
actor.
I didn't do good. You know, they tried me for that part of in the movie She's Loose, that she says, chop wood for breakfast, chop wood for dinner, chop wood for this, that part.
You're my favorite actress anyway.
John?
Yeah, I tried to see that film. I was just a teenager at the time. The film had some sort of successful opening, which was not closed down because of picketing.
Before it even showed,
I believe so.
I think in France.
Show where?
In Europe.
In Europe. It did very well in Europe.
Yeah.
And the other place that did really well was Cuba. It's Fidel Castro's favorite movie. Seriously. I've watched it about 20 times.
That's before the revolution.
And so we made the trip over there to go see it for the first time. Because the theaters, they wouldn't show it because they couldn't find the projectionist.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. And to begin with, there were only like 2 theaters in Silver City anyway. And so this was a drive-in where we went to see it.
You're just
And
glad
I
to
think
get
they were
off stage.
supposed to see it, show it for 2 weeks, and then they had to extend it because there were more people that wanted to come see it.
After the movie.
All their lives for years and years, they were ready. They were ready to go to the picket line. It's too bad. Right now, a lot of those ladies are gone. They're no longer there, and there are very few people left. But they were ready to go. And the others, little by little, at first they wouldn't go, but then as the strike went on, they were willing to go.
Anita, I have a little question. You know, when the women took over the strike, they said that the women came from, you know, Empire Zinc, of course, but then outside the town as well. And how did they back then there wasn't any cell phones. There wasn't any mass communication, social networking. So how did people find out about this, about that the women took over the strike?
Well, through the radio, the radio, and soon after that, we had a program. The union had a program that came out on the radio. I happened to take part in those radio shows. It was, I forget, I think it was one day of the week that we had to go into Silver City, and they would put on this announcement of the strike, telling the women. And then after that, the union was always busy, meeting and then talking to some of the ladies, doing a lot of volunteer. They would see there's Hanover and Silver City and Santa Rita and Burley and Central. That's all the mining area. So a lady would or more than one, would volunteer to go and pick them up at different places and bring them in to the picket lines. And that was no problem then. They were willing.
Very good. Okay, John?
On a smaller scale,
To raise funds for the legal defense of Clinton Jenks, who was under charges and everything. And so Anita had gone on tour to raise money, and she was on her way to Vancouver, and she stopped in Compton, California, and stopped at our home with my parents. And my older brother says that the door was, the knock on the door, or at some point in time, he saw a woman, a young, beautiful woman, he says, that was dressed up like a movie star, like with a really, like a big mink coat type of thing, and really beautiful. And he was talking about Anita. And Anita had come in, so that must have been in like 1954, something like that in that area. So my older brother, must have been about 10 or 11 years old, and then the other brother must have been about maybe 9. So I was in there too. But that was Anita, who came into town to stay overnight on her way to Vancouver to raise money for Clinton Jenks. So that's the story.
Well, I wasn't supposed to have stayed. It was hard finding people or a woman to agree to go on this trip. The women, they all had babies, they all had kids. They said, I can't go. I have 6 kids, I have 4 kids, or whatever. I can't go. And I got talked into doing it. I had two kids, and I was living in Hayden at the time, but we were communicating, and they needed someone to go to raise funds for Clint, because he had been in jail, for 3 months. And so before I knew it, I said, yes, I'll go. Well, the first thing is, I had never ridden a plane. This was the first time I went to Bayard, and from Bayard, I went in a bus from Bayard to El Paso. And some union people, a couple from Mine Mill picked me up in El Paso, and they took me to the airport. It was United Airline. They put me in the plane. And I was scared stiff to get in the plane, because it was the first time I was ever going to get in the plane. And so I was to go to LA, but I wasn't supposed to stay. I was supposed to change flights and go on to Seattle, and from Seattle to Vancouver. When I got to LA, I said, no way, I'm not going to go in the plane at night. I'll go in the daytime, but not at night. So I got off, and I tried to go. I had Steve's brother's address, because he was a mine mill officer in LA, and they had given me his name and address, and they said, if you need anything, call him.
It's my father.
And it was his father. So I called. He didn't answer. Nobody answered. But I had the address. So I called the taxi. I don't even remember how much I had to pay for the taxi. He took me all the way to Compton or wherever. That was the first time I was in California. I had no idea whether it was near, far, or what. Well, he took me. And I go and knock at his brother's door, and they weren't there. I said, well, now what am I going to do? They weren't there. This was getting late. It was getting late. So I went next door. I left my suitcase right there by the door, and I went next door. And it was, I forget whether it was a Chinese family or a Japanese family of some sort, but they spoke English. And I told them if they knew the Valencias that were next door, and they said, well, no, not really. Yes, we've been living here, but we don't know very well. And I told them, well, I'm supposed to stay here overnight, and they're not there. And they said, well, come in. He said, you can wait here until they come. So I went in there, and God, I don't know, it was hours by the time the Valencians came home. I had left them a note, who I was and where I was at. So then he comes to the neighbors and takes me to the house, and I said, well, I have to get on the plane tomorrow. But, I had already followed up because and in Seattle, they were waiting for me over there. But of course, I didn't let them know, they didn't know. So that was the wrong thing to do, but that's what I did. But eventually I got to Vancouver, and I was there for 2 weeks. They took me, they were having a mine mill convention in Canada. So I went there to the convention, and I was supposed to, talk about Clint's case, and I was there to try to raise funds. And then they took me to several places over there. And well, once I got there, it was okay. Then they put me back in the plane, and coming back was much better than going.
What an adventure, Anita.
That was a big adventure.
Very good.
But there's a lot of things that happen that I guess this Hollywood 10 did a very good job because you might know, you might not know that Rosaura, the main leading star, before the movie was finished, they deported her because they said that she didn't have the right papers, and I don't know about all, and this was well into the movie. I mean, it didn't happen right away. And they went and picked her up and took her to El Paso, and they tried to get her back, and to no avail. So then the Hollywood 10 was trying to figure out how in the world were they going to finish the movie. And my sister does a few poses for Rosaura that nobody knows because you don't see her face, you just see her back. But she stood in her place for a few shots. Then the rest of them, were done like in LA, the eviction scene. There's a lot of those people that are people from LA to finish it up, the eviction scene.
A lot of people who've never seen the film. For the video, could you state your name and the title of the film and why you think it's important for people to watch it?
You want me to say that?
If you can say your name,
Yeah.
and then work the title for the video and why you recommend it as a film that is a must-watch.
Okay, my name is Anita Torrez. Originally from Grant County, Silver City in New Mexico, and took part in the movie of Salt of the Earth since my husband was a striker at Empire Zinc. And it's amazing that as many times as this movie has been shown, there's always 1, 2, or 3 people that say they have never seen it, but this is the first time they see it, and they all say they like it, and they'll be sure to watch it again. Well, the reason that I say they should watch it is because this is a struggle that still alive today. Because of that strike, the struggle didn't end. You know, it's still going on. It's been very hard on the unions. You know, the unions are depleting more and more for different reasons. You know, all the automation, they laid workers off, and then it's hard to organize more workers. And this movie, I think, is very good at showing what the union can do when we unite. Nothing can be done if we don't unite. And you know, the struggle is everybody's struggle, and one person can't win it. We need to unite, back each other up, and like we say, you know, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Thank you very much. Perfect, perfect, thank you.
And you know, there's this, oh, did they leave? Did they leave your mother and dad? Oh, see, now this couple, I knew over there, and that were, his brother was very active in the strike, because he was an imposing striker. Vicente Becerra. And this is a younger brother of his. And then the wife also, see her name, she's over there, Magdalena. And I knew her as Nena all the time, Nena. And we used to see each other all the time. And her sister is in the movie, because, you know, she was a wife of one of the strikers. And she's in the movie, and she's the lady that has her name is Eva, and she's in front of a store on the outside, and she has a scarf and a bag, and I forget what it says, no strikers allowed or something. That's her sister. And then in jail also, she's shown in jail. And I was supposed to have gone to jail because they had a warrant for me to go to jail too, but they never found me, so I never got there.
And the baby was my niece.
Yes, the one that's crying her head off.
Her sister's baby.
Yeah, the one that's crying so much. Yeah, that was Eva and Chente's baby. Yeah. Now they live in Mammoth. They live in Mammoth. And I hadn't seen them in years.
Would be able to do something like this, kids and families today?
You mean a movie like this?
Just the strike.
Huh?
The strike. Have you heard of similar things going on today?
Fast food workers.
Well, you know, now it's very hard. I think for one reason is that the unions have depleted so much. You know, that people don't think the same anymore. Like this strike in PD. You know, it was a big disappointment. You know, the women took over, and it was a big disappointment. And the union started going downhill. You know, they said, well, the union didn't do enough. Why did the union permit this? You know, what happened at Phelps Dodge. So you know, it's very hard for the organizers right now. Very, very hard to organize.
But it's not impossible.
That's right.
So that's why I say, you know, the struggle continues. The struggle never ends.
All right.
Encouragement to fast food workers who are striking. That's the current struggle of the day. Recently, Phoenix and different cities, McDonald's workers going on strike for a living wage, $15 an hour. You know, fast forward 50, 60 years later, like you say, the struggle continues.
Well, the teachers were successful, you know, in Chicago. That's a pretty important struggle where, you know, it wasn't just the teachers, but the community. So they must have lasted at least 2 years trying to organize that kind of support. But they did win some very big concessions from the board, and these were Chicago teachers. So something like that is a good example of the fact that these tools that we learned from Salt of the Earth are being used in other parts of, in other industries, in other parts of the country. So,
Thank you so much. Thank
well,
you for
thank
showing
you
up
so
now.
much.
And one of the things is the struggle for the women. You know where the bar was? Right there. Yeah. And in Hanover, I know my dad's brother didn't have water until the 70s. The struggle is still there. Yes. So, and if we can do something about our governor giving us, rights to negotiate with. Right now, the governor doesn't give us rights to negotiate with.
We respect the people that we get to take. It's an honor,
Give us a heads up too if there's something you're like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
I want to make sure, you know, and I know this person's getting older. This is a once in a lifetime.
It's very important to capture it, you know.
Yeah.
There's a few guys, you know, that are here in the room here that.
And the other,